Good evening, good vach, Shavua Tov, and it's time to celebrate Lag BaOmer. We've reached the 33rd day in the count of 50 days from Pesach, from Passover to Shavuos. And while we took on some of the mourning practices during this period, remembering, memorializing the thousands and thousands of Torah scholars who died during this period, the students of Rabbi Akiva, that tragedy ended on this day. It's also the yahrzeit of the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we've been talking about, particularly his son, Rabbi Lazar, and grandson, Rabbi Yosei, lately. So it is a time to pick it up. There's going to be massive celebrations tonight and tomorrow, the bonfires of Lag BaOmer. Let's light up the darkness. I also would like to share that, I was really haunted, right? I think I mentioned yesterday I tried to get an answer about why Rabbi Yochanan said, right, didn't pray for mercy after his anger, his seeming curse to Reish Lakish led to Reish Lakish becoming ill and dying, right? And while he was ill, his wife, who was Rabbi Yochanan's sister, came and said, because he offended you and you became angry at him, he became ill and now he's dying. Don't make me a widow. Don't make his children orphans. And he just, issued a line from Jeremiah saying that God will take care of the widow. God will take care of the orphans, as if that would comfort her. And then she lost her husband. So I was talking with two of my rabbis today, my Rav, Yekusiel Kalmanson, and my good friend Rabbi Meni Chazanov, and now I have an answer that I can offer you. I'm not saying it's the answer, certainly not the only answer, but it's an answer that gives me a lot of comfort and what to think about. So in short, Rabbi Yochanan did not mean to insult Reish Lakish, and somebody as exalted and at such a high level as a chacham, a sage, as Rabbi Yochanan would not just violate the prohibition on reminding a Baal Tshuva, somebody who has returned to Torah, about his life before he did that in a way that would be pejorative. And that is not what Rabbi Yochanan was doing. So when he had taught in his Beis Midrash, in his house of study, that a sword is completed the last time it goes in the furnace And then Reish Lakish said, actually, it's when it is scoured with water and acquires a gleaming shine, right? Which the reason it's finished then is because that helps a soldier be more intimidating. And Rabbi Yochanan said, well, the bandit knows his banditry, or the bandit knows the tools of his craft, something like that. And Reish Lakish took offense, right? Because he'd been a bandit before he became a Torah scholar. This wasn't an insult, right? Rabbi Yochanan, first of all, he was saying he knows, right? I'm wrong, he's right. So he was conceding that Reish Lakish is right. But he was also saying this is actually the culmination. This is a moment of joy, a moment of celebration, right? That to think, where you were and where you've come and what you are, right, is a complete vessel. You are a complete vessel. Somebody who becomes a Torah scholar is just giving all of their me'od, their veriness, right? That Reish Lakish had given himself in Torah for all these many years and had just become such a luminary, who was able to correct Rabbi Yochanan in his own study hall. And why was he able to do that? Because he brings all of himself, all those years of study and his experiences, who he is, those formative experiences, that he was a gladiator, even that he was a criminal, those things, you bring them with you and they make you who you are today. And the fact that you're able to make teshuvah, we had this teaching before that when somebody makes teshuvah for their sins, those sins get transformed into merits, right? It's not something to be ashamed of. And so you don't remind people of that, but this was a different kind of situation. And so it was really a kind of celebratory moment. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan was trying to say. Reish Lakish took it completely the wrong way. Right, what he had done is that he had sealed off his past in a box, locked it up, throw away the key. Didn't want to be reminded that there was a period in his life when he wasn't a Torah scholar. And we can understand the psychology of that, but what it meant was that as a Torah scholar, he was only bringing that side of himself in the service of God. And he wasn't going to bring all parts of himself. This is why we actually say in the prayer book, may I serve you with all of me, that even my evil inclination should serve God. That's a whole other set of teachings. But it's true. You need to bring all of yourself together. And this concept of integration, right? Integration. And so Rabbi Akiva, for example, we were talking about him today in Shul. Rabbi Akiva was able to see in the darkest moments, in the despair, right? He and his generation saw the destruction of the second temple, and everyone was so woebegone and crestfallen, didn't know how they were going to continue. And they came to Rabbi Akiva for chizuk, for encouragement, for strength, because he has that famous story when he saw foxes on the Temple Mount, and walking with several other sages, the greats of his generation, and they all cried, and he laughed. And they said to him, "How can you laugh?" And he answered them, "How can you cry?" And then he said, "Now that I've seen this negative prophecy fulfilled, now I know that the positive prophecy, that eventually the temple will be rebuilt, Mashiach will come, and history will get to a positive place. It might take a long time, but it will happen." But we always rush over the part where he says, why do you cry? Right? And that was actually the answer. When they say, "How can you laugh?" And he says, why do you laugh? And he says, "Why do you cry?" What he's saying is the reason you cry is because you're so connected to God, to Torah, to the tradition. And it's that connection that's going to see us through. Right? So we bring our darkest hours, those experiences that we have in our worst moments. Right? If we understand that we have to bring all of ourselves in our service of God, then those shameful, negative, terrible, suffering, bad experiences, our baggage, right? Our baggage, we bring that with us and it gets turned into part of our service of God, right? And so when Rabbi Yochanan saw And then Reish Lakish answers him, what have you done for me? Meaning I was a bandit before, you're calling me a bandit now, so all these years, what have you done for me? And Rabbi Yochanan thought, oh my gosh, like he doesn't get it. And it's like Reish Lakish brought that curse on himself. It wasn't Rabbi Yochanan's anger. Rabbi Yochanan was just disappointed. He was in mourning already because he saw that Reish Lakish just couldn't bring that part. Now, maybe it was his job to educate him and help him see that. And maybe that's the missing part of the dialogue, or maybe he was just so affronted that it became a fight. He didn't have time to say it before Reish Lakish stormed off. I don't know. I don't know all those. We don't know those details. But as a takeaway, it's so important to understand that we bring all of ourselves, and we don't have to lock away parts of ourselves. We just understand that there's behaviors that we can't allow ourselves to indulge in, but the person we are who indulged in those previous behaviors, we're going to bring those urges and inclinations and transform them into positive, holy inclinations and act on that. And that is an integrated person who is giving his all for God, for Torah, for the tradition, etc. So hopefully that's a bit helpful. That definitely helped me when I heard that today. Okay, our daf today is, well, let me just welcome people. Joe in the Inland Empire, Paul in the Great Northwest, Sharon in New Jersey. Wow, is it late? And I'm sorry to spend any time not teaching. I'm on it. Bella in Florida. Wow. Bill in mid-Missouri. You guys are awesome. John in Maine. Karen, Shavuot Tov. Joe. Compartmentalized life. Exactly. Mickey in New Jersey. Wow. Spencer in Connecticut. Marie in Freeport, New York. Well past midnight. I'm in awe, guys. I'm in awe. You're bringing all of you for the sake of Torah. Let's go. Our page is 86, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 7 of Tractate Bava Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. We're going to do some more stories of the sages and then get a little bit back into the law that we're discussing. The Gemara relates another story discussing the greatness of the sages. Rav Kahana said, Rav Chama, the son of the daughter of Chasa, told me that Rabbah bar Nachmani died due to the fear of a decree of religious persecution. And the Gemara explains, his enemies accused him of disloyalty in the king's palace. Now, this is a sage who's just teaching Torah. What disloyalty to the king, presumably the king of Persia, is he involved in? And they said, there is one man among the Jews who exempts 12,000 Jewish men from the king's head tax 2 months a year, 1 month in the summer and 1 month in the winter. What does this mean? Since many people would study in Rabbah's study hall during the months of Adar and Elul, he was being blamed for preventing these people from working during those months. And if they're not working, they're not being taxed on their income, and it causes a loss to the king. Right? So he's saying that some Jew hater is saying that this Jew is keeping the Jews from working because they're so busy learning Torah. So they sent a messenger of the king after him, right? They leveled this accusation in the palace, and now, all they said is that this is a guy who's causing Jews not to pay taxes. So now they're sending some enforcer, some messenger, but an enforcer of the king to go track him down. But the messenger was not able to find him, as Rabbah bar Nachmani fled and went from Pumbedisa to Acra, from Acra to Agma, and from Agma to Shechin, and from Shechin to Tzarifa, and from Tzarifa to Eina Demayan, and from Eina Demayan back to Pumbedisa. Ultimately, he was found in Pumbedisa. As the king's messenger arrived by chance at the same inn where Rabbah, so Rabbah bar Nachmani is Rabbah, the famous Rabbah, where Rabbah was hiding. And the inn attendants placed a tray before the messenger and gave him 2 cups to drink. And they then removed the tray from before him. And his face was miraculously turned backward. Anybody remember The Exorcist, where the girl's head turns all the way around? Okay, well, somehow this messenger who came looking for Rabbah, ate or drank something, and suddenly his head swiveled around and was facing behind him, right? Some terrible condition. The attendants said to Rabbah, "What should we do with him? He is the king's man. We cannot leave him like this." Rabbah said to them, "Place a tray before him and give him 1 cup to drink, and then remove the tray from before him, and he will be healed." And they did this, and he was healed. And the messenger said, "I am certain that the man I seek is here, as this unnatural event must have befallen me on his account." So this messenger of the king actually has some respect for the holiness of Torah scholars. He searched for Rabbah and he found out where he was. And the messenger said that they should tell Rabbah, "I will leave this inn and I will not disclose your location. And even if they will kill that man," right, speaking of himself in the third person, euphemistically, "I will not disclose your location. But if they will beat him," meaning me, the messenger is saying, "if they torture me, I'm not going to be able to hold out. Then I will disclose your location, as I can't bear to be tortured." So with that guarantee, they brought Rabbah before the messenger. And they took him into a small vestibule and closed the door before him. Rabbah prayed for mercy, and the wall crumbled. And he fled and went to hide in a swamp. And he was sitting on the stump of a palm tree and studying Torah by himself in the swamp. At that moment, the sages in the heavenly academy were disagreeing with regard to a halacha, a law of tsaras. In general, a spot that is tsaras includes 2 signs of impurity, a bright white spot and a white hair. And the basic law is that if the snow white sore preceded the white hair, then the person is tameh, he has tsaras. But if the white hair preceded the white sore, then he is tahor, he's pure, meaning he does not have tsaras, he's not a mitzorah. So so this is the heavenly academy, right? And so the idea is that the sages who study Torah all their lives in this world, they merit to continue studying Torah in heaven. And the difference is between studying Torah here and in heaven is that the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the academy in heaven, is Hashem, is God. They get to study with God. So the heavenly debate concerned a case of suffix, of uncertainty, right? They were not sure exactly what the law is in this very technical, difficult area of the law of tsaras involving the white hair and the white sore and whether that is tsaras or not. The Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, says this person who has this particular condition is pure, tahor. But every other member of the heavenly academy says tameh, impure. So even in heaven, in the heavenly academy, the sages are so committed to the truth that, if it seems to them, based on all their understanding and all their experience, and now with the incredible added breadth of understanding that you get when your soul leaves this world and, can see all of history, etc., in the world beyond. So they're not going to just flatter God and say, well, you're God, so you must be right. So they disagree with God. So in the heavenly academy, all the sages disagree with God. On the one hand, God says pure. All the other ones say impure. Okay? Now, that's like a tie, let's say. So God says pure, and all the others say impure. And they said in the heavenly academy, who can arbitrate this dispute? And they agreed that Rabbah, Bar Nachmani, Rabbah, should arbitrate. As Rabbah once said, I am preeminent in the laws of tsaras, and I am preeminent in the laws of ritual impurity imparted by tents. Right? So those were the 2 specific areas in halacha, in Jewish law, where he was just the top expert. He had just attained a breadth and depth of understanding in those areas that made him the preeminent scholar. So in heaven, they need him to arbitrate in a dispute between God and all the other sages. And they sent a messenger from heaven after him to take his soul up to the heavenly academy. I want no time for jokes. But the angel of death was unable to approach Rabbah as his mouth did not cease from his Torah study. Right, so you get the picture? They need him in heaven. He's pitching, right? He's a starter in the heavenly baseball game in this case, or he's the referee, and they need him up there to be the referee to arbitrate the dispute between God and all the other sages on this question of Saras. And so in order to be up there, he needs to die. The point is his time has come. But the angel of death is powerless over a sage to take him as long as he is in the midst of Torah study, and his lips never stop learning Torah, so the angel of death could not take him, as his mouth did not cease from his Torah study. And in the meantime, a wind blew and howled between the branches. And Rabbah thought that the noise was due to an infantry battalion of the king sent to capture him, right? Because that messenger never brought him back. So they're still hunting him down, right? Because he's been accused, sort of a libel, a tax libel, accusing him of keeping Jews from paying their taxes because he's so busy teaching them Torah. So Rabbah thought that this wind in the trees was actually a battalion of soldiers come to get him. And he said, let that man, meaning himself, let that man die and not be given over to the hands of the government. And so the angel of death was therefore able to take his soul. As he was dying, he said in response to the dispute in heaven, Tahor, Tahor, it is pure. Meaning, God was right. Okay? You might all be the sages who ever lived, the wisest who ever lived, but, at the end of the day, God. So a divine voice emerged from heaven and said, happy are you, Rabbah bar Nachmani, as your body is pure, and your soul left your body in this world with the final word, like he was able to arbitrate the dispute even before his soul had fully left his body, meaning that the last word that his mouth uttered in this world was pure. The word pure. It was an answer to that question, but that was the last word that he said. Happy are you that was the last word that came out of your mouth. A note, known as a pitka, fell from heaven and landed in the academy of Pumbedisa, and the note said, Rabbah bar Nachmani was summoned to the heavenly academy, meaning he has died. Abaye and Rabbah and all the other rabbis went out to tend to his burial. However, they did not know the location of his body because he was hiding in the swamp. They went to the swamp and they saw birds forming shade, right, with extending their wings and forming a canopy of shade over a certain spot. And the rabbis said, we can conclude from this that Rabbah is there. The rabbis mourned him for 3 days and 3 nights. A note fell from heaven upon which was written, anyone who removes himself from the mourning for Rabbah shall be ostracized. And accordingly, they mourned for him for a complete 7 days, like a shiva, meaning you don't normally mourn for 7 days except for a family member when you sit shiva. But when such a great Torah luminary as Rabbah left this world, all the other Torah scholars mourned for him like a family member. They sat shiva for 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, another note fell from heaven stating, go to your homes in peace. On that day, when Rabbah bar Nachmani died, a hurricane lifted a certain Arab merchant while he was riding his camel. And the hurricane carried him from one side of the Papa River and threw him onto the other side. Now, Arabs, of course, in those days, they were, kind of locals, ancestors of modern Arabs, but their religion was avodah zarah, right? It was idolatry. They worshipped idols in that period. So he said, what is this? And those present said to him, Rabbah bar Nachmani has died. And he said before God, Master of the universe, the entire world is yours, and Rabbah bar Nachmani is also yours. You are to Rabbah, and Rabbah is to you. You are beloved to each other. If so, why are you destroying the world on his account? And the storm subsided. So what you have is somebody who was an idolater who was moved by these events to become a monotheist. I don't know if he became a Jew or not, but at least he became a Noahide, I would say. The Gemara concludes its earlier discussion of obese sages. That's how we got into this long digression on page 84. Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta was obese. One day he was particularly hot, and he went and sat on a mountain boulder to cool himself off. And he said to his daughter, my daughter, Fan me with a fan, and as a gift I will give you packages of spikenard. Spikenard? What is spikenard? It said there was a spikenard is a perfume derived from some plant with a Latin name, native to the Himalayas. And it was highly valued throughout the ancient world and was one of the ingredients of the incense in the holy temple. So he says to his daughter, fan me with a fan and I will give you packages of spikenard. And in the meantime, a strong wind blew. And he said, how many packages of spikenard do I owe to the overseers of this wind? I really don't understand what I just said. How many packages of spikenard do I owe to the overseers of this wind? Maybe the wind blew away this very expensive perfume. I'm not sure I understand that. The Gemara returns to its discussion of the Mishnah on page 83a, our Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 7, which teaches that an employer must provide his laborers with sustenance, all in accordance with the regional custom, right? That's what we learned in this Mishnah. And the Gemara asked, what is added by the inclusive term all, right? In accordance with local custom. What do you mean all in accordance with local custom? So the Gemara answers that this serves to include a place where it is customary for the laborers to eat bread and drink a quarter lug of wine. As if in such a case the employer were to say to them, arise early in the morning and I will bring you this sustenance so as not to waste your work time, they may say to him, it is not in your power to compel us to do so. Where there are local labor laws, you need to follow them. The Mishnah teaches that there was an incident involving Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia, right? This was in the Mishnah, who said to his son, go out and hire laborers for us. And his son hired the laborers and stipulated that he would provide sustenance for them. And the Gemara asks, after the Mishnah stated that all practices are in accordance with the regional custom, how can it cite this incident, which seems to contradict the previous ruling, as Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia and his son did not follow the regional custom, right? Remember that the son went out and said to the workers, I will provide sustenance, and he didn't specify what. And then his father said, how could you say you're going to feed them and not tell them what kind of food you're going to feed them? They're Jews. That means they're descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That means that they're royalty, right? All Jews are nobility because they're descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, if you promise to feed them without saying you're going to just feed them a basic meal of bread and legumes, you owe them the kind of meal that would be, even greater than a meal that King Solomon would eat, because that's what they're entitled to as nobles. Is a little bit hyperbolic speaking, but what he's saying is you can't just say you're going to feed them. When you make the deal to hire them, you have to tell them what you're going to feed them. Now the Gemara is asking, why did they even have this conversation? Why does the Mishnah include this story? If everything is according to regional custom, what difference does it make? If he said, I'm going to feed you, it must be he's going to feed them like regional custom. So the Gemara answers that the Mishnah is incomplete, and this is what it is teaching. All practices are in accordance with the regional custom, but if the employer pledged to provide sustenance for the workers, he has increased his obligation to them. Since if he had meant to give them no more than the accepted regionally accustomed amount, he would not have to make any stipulation at all. If he said he's going to feed them, it's like he's saying he's going to give them more than what they're normally going to get. And the Mishnah then continues, and there is also the supporting incident involving Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia, who said to his son, go out and hire laborers for us, and his son went and hired them and pledged to provide sustenance for them as a term of their employment without specifying the details. And when he came back to his father, it's what I just said, but now it's being spelled out, and reported what he had done, Rabbi Yochanan ben Metzia said to him, my son, even if you were to prepare a feast for them like that of King Solomon in his time, you would not have fulfilled your obligation to them, as they are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the Gemara asks, is this to say that the feast of Abraham, our forefather, was superior to that of King Solomon? But isn't it written, quote, and Solomon's provision for one day was 30 measures of fine flour and 60 measures of meal, 10 fat oxen and 20 oxen out of the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides harts, meaning the kind of deer that's called a hart, H-A-R-T, and gazelles and roebucks and fatted fowl. 1 Kings 5, verses 2 and 3. Right? In other words, King Solomon was throwing the most lavish buffet imaginable, far in excess of Las Vegas, every day. And Gurion ben Astayon says in the name of Ra, these measures of flour mentioned in the verse were used merely for the baker's well-worked dough that was placed on the pot to absorb the steam. I mean, it was even greater than what we just said. And Rabbi Yitzchak says, these measures of flour were used for meat pudding, a mixture of wine, flour, and leftover meat in a pot. In other words, just for one of the dishes that King Solomon was serving, to this massive people that was always dining in his palace. And Rabbi Yitzchak further says, King Solomon had 1,000 wives, each one of whom would prepare for him at her home a feast of such proportions. Not only was this unbelievable, excessive feast going on every day at his palace, but there were 1,000 feasts like it at each of the palaces of his 1,000 wives. And what is the reason that they did this? The wives' reason, well, perhaps he will feast with me today. And another wife reason, perhaps he will feast with me today. But with regard to Abraham, it is written, and Abraham ran to the herd and fetched a calf tender and good. Genesis 18:7. Well, it doesn't sound like Abraham was having such an excessive feast like King Solomon was. And Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says, in explanation of that verse about Abraham, right, when he says, ran to the herd and fetched a calf tender and good. So Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says, a calf, this indicates one. The word tender indicates an additional calf. And the word good, this indicates a third calf. That actually Abraham, when he fed the angels who came to visit him, in the incident when they told him that he's going to have a son, Yitzchak, that there were 3 angels who came disguised as men, that actually he didn't just prepare 1 calf, he prepared 3 calves, like 3 calves for 3 people, maybe a few more people that are in Abraham's retinue. Still, like 1 calf will probably feed, 50 people, and he's been doing a calf, 3 calves at this meal. And the Gemara answers there, with regard to Abraham, he prepared 3 oxen for 3 people. Whereas here, in the case of Solomon, his wives would prepare a feast for the entire realms of Israel. And Yehuda, right, Judah, which is like, the eastern part of Israel. As it is stated, Judah and Israel, meaning these, areas of the Holy Land, were many. Judah and Israel were many as the sand. Judah's Judea, right? Judah and Israel were many as the sand which is by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and making merry. 1 Kings 4:20. So Abraham's feast was proportionately greater than that of Solomon. In other words, Solomon was having this unbelievable lavish feast, but he was feeding thousands of people. Abraham prepared 3 calves for 3 visitors. So proportionally, he's giving out more. Now, with regard to the verse cited in relation to King Solomon, the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the term fatted fowl, avusim? Rav says it means that they are fed, ofsim, by force. This is like goose pate, goose liver. I think those geese are force fed so that they'll be very fatty, sad, in order to get that, that food. Shmuel says it means that they were fattened and maintained on their own accord. Not that they were food stuffed down their throats, but rather that these kinds of fowl were naturally fat. Rabbi Yochanan says Solomon's feasts were of fine quality because they would bring from his herd an ox that had never been forced to work, and they would also bring a hen from its coop that had never been forced to lay eggs, and use those for the cuisine. Now, the Gemara cites a related incident of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, the choicest of cattle is the ox. The choicest of fowl is the hen. With regard to the type of hen to which this is referring, a Maimar says it is a fattened black hen that is found among the wine vats, which consumes so many grape seeds that it cannot take a step in the length of a reed due to its corpulence. And the Gemara returns to discuss the verse in Genesis. And Abraham ran to the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good. And Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says a calf is 1. Tender indicates an additional 1, meaning 2, and good indicates another 1 for a total of 3 calves. And the Gemara asks, but why not say that the verse is referring to only 1 calf? as people say when describing a single item that is tender and good. Why are you seeing fit to, read into the adjectives tender and good that the Torah used to describe the calf that Abraham fetched when these visitors came? Why are we interpreting that as meaning that there were 2 additional calves? Why are we saying this? And the Gemara... so the Gemara answers, well, if so, the verse should have just written tender, good calf. What is the significance of the term and good, which indicates an addition? Conclude from this that the verse is stated for the purpose of an exposition and is referring to more than one calf. So the Gemara challenges again, okay, but one can still say that there were only 2 calves. And the Gemara answers, from the fact that the word good is written for an exposition to include an additional calf, it may be inferred that the term tender is also written for an exposition and indicates yet another calf. Rabbah bar Ula raises an objection, and some say it is Rav Hoshaya, and some say it is Rav Nassan, the son of Rabbi Hoshaya, who raises this objection. The verse states, and he gave it to the servant, and he hastened to prepare it. Now the singular term it indicates that there was only 1 calf. And the Gemara answers, Abraham gave each and every calf to 1 servant. And he gave the 3 calves to 3 different servants. That's what it means. And the Gemara raises a question from the verse, and he took curd and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them, which again indicates that there was only 1 calf. And the Gemara responds, the verse means that as each calf arrived prepared, he brought it before them, and he did not serve all 3 calves at once. Now, remember, who are these guests? They're angels who never even ate anything. They might have pretended to eat, but angels don't eat. So it's sad. A lot of calves were prepared for guests that did not eat. But he offered, right? He gets the merit for offering to take care of his guests. Now the Gemara asks, why do I need 3 calves? 1 calf should be sufficient for 3 guests. And Rav Chanan bar Rabbah said Abraham prepared 3 calves in order to feed the guests 3 tongues with mustard, a particular delicacy. With regard to this incident, Rabbi Tanchum bar Hanilai says a person should never deviate from the local custom. As Moses ascended to heaven on high, and he did not eat bread while he was there for 40 days, receiving the Torah, because in heaven they don't eat. Whereas the ministering angels who descended to visit Abraham, they ate bread. And you say, the Gemara says, and they ate bread? Can it enter your mind that they actually ate food? Rather, say that they merely appeared as though they ate and drank. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says every action that Abraham performed himself for the ministering angels who visited him, the Holy One, blessed be He, performed himself, God himself, performed for Abraham's descendants, the Jewish people. And every action that Abraham performed through a messenger, the Holy One, blessed be He, likewise performed for his descendants through a messenger. And the Gemara explains, with regard to Abraham, the verse states, and Abraham ran to the herd, bringing the meat himself. And in reference to God's actions for Abraham's descendants, the verse states, and there went forth a wind from the Lord and brought quail from the sea. Right, when the children of Israel were in the midbar, in the wilderness, and they were complaining there was no meat. So God personally brought this flock of quail for them to eat. Right, so much meat that it came out their noses, and they apologized for being complainers who were not satisfied with the manna. But at any rate, the Lord himself brought the meat. And in reference to Abraham, the verse states, and he took curd and milk. And God says to the Jewish people, behold, I will cause to rain bread from heaven for you, the manna. So again, God personally fed his descendants. And with regard to Abraham, the verse states, and he stood by them under the tree, and they ate. And in reference to God, the verse states, behold, I will stand before you there upon the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and there shall come water out of it. And in the case of Abraham, it is written, Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. He escorted them on their way. That's why it's a mitzvah when guests come to your house and stay with you. When they leave, at a minimum, you walk them down to the end of the driveway, but you make sure that they know where they're going. You have to escort them on their way as they leave you. And Abraham did that. And the verse states that the Lord went before them by day. God escorted us through the wilderness. By contrast, Abraham performed certain actions through an agent. He said, now let a little water be fetched. And correspondingly, the verse states in reference to Moses, God's messenger, and you shall strike the rock, and there shall come water out of it, and the people may drink. Moses was acting as God's agent to give the people water. And the Gemara notes, and in stating this, Rav disagrees with that statement of Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina. Because Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says, and likewise the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, in reward for 3 acts of hospitality that Abraham performed for these angels, his descendants merited 3 rewards. And the Gemara elaborates. Now, this is a more direct connection than the previous saying, well, Abraham did stuff personally for those guests, so God did stuff personally for the Jews later. And what Abraham deputized, his servant to do, God deputized Moses to do. But it was a little bit, the parallels weren't like so direct. But now, 3 acts of hospitality led to 3 acts by God. This connection might seem a little clearer, right? In reward for 3 acts of hospitality that Abraham performed for the angels, his descendants merited 3 rewards. And the Gemara explains, in reward for providing them with curd and milk, the Jewish people merited to receive manna. In reward for, and he stood by them, the Jews merited the pillar of cloud of God standing by us in the wilderness, the presence of God. And in reward for Abraham saying, now let a little water be fetched, they merited the well of Miriam, which provided water all the years that the Jews were wandering in the desert. But this statement does not distinguish between actions performed by Abraham himself versus those performed by means of a messenger. And the Gemara continues its analysis of the verse, let now a little water be fetched and wash your feet. And the angels, right? So let us wash your feet. And Rabbi Yanai, the son of Rabbi Yishmael, said that the guests said to Abraham, are you suspicious that we are Arabs who bow down to the dust of their feet? Meaning idolaters, right? Who don't respect the one God, but who bow down to idols made of metal and stone. And that's why you want us to wash our feet. But Yishmael had already issued from him, i.e., your own son acts in this manner, that Yishmael, was not a Jew and had become an idolater. Now, the Gemara expounds another verse involving Abraham. And the Lord appeared to him by the terebinths of Mamre as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. Right, this is what he was doing right before those 3 angels came to visit him. So the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the heat of the day? And Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says that day was the 3rd day after Abraham's circumcision. And the Holy One, blessed be he, came to inquire about the well-being of Abraham. And the Holy One, blessed be he, removed the sun from its sheath in order not to bother that righteous one with guests. I.e., God made it extremely hot that day because he knows that Abraham is always dying to provide hospitality to people so that he could, take care of them and tell them about the one God. And even when he's in the midst of his pain, he's going to be ready to do that. So God said, let me arrange it so that no guests will come walking by. And that's why it was such a hot day during Abraham's recovery from his circumcision at 100 years of age. I'm sorry, at 100 years of age. Or 99 years of age, I think. And blessed be he, and the Holy One, blessed be, came to, Right. What is the meaning of the heat of the day? The Rabbi Chama says that was the 3rd day after Abraham's circumcision. And the Holy One, blessed be he, personally came to inquire about the well-being of Abraham. And the Holy One, blessed be he, removed the sun from its sheath in order not to bother that righteous one with guests. I.e., God made it extremely hot that day to allow Abraham to recover from his circumcision, as he would not be troubled by passing travelers whom he would invite into his tent, right? Although God himself came to visit him, right? And from that we learn that it's a mitzvah to visit the sick. What do you mean God himself came to visit? In the form of these 3 angels. Now, despite the intense heat, Abraham wanted to invite guests, so he sent Eliezer, his servant, to go outside to see if there were any passers-by. Eliezer went out, but he didn't find anybody. Abraham said to him, I don't believe you. And the Gemara comments, this demonstrates the popular adage that people there in Eretz Yisrael say slaves do not have any credibility. And the Gemara continues, Abraham himself went out and saw that the Holy One, blessed be he, was standing at the entrance of his tent. And this is as it is written, my Lord, if now I have found favor in your eyes, do not leave your servant. I.e., God's presence was there, and Abraham asked him for permission to attend to the travelers. So not what I said before, not that the angels were some kind of manifestation of God, but rather there was some kind of manifestation of God, the Shekhinah, the presence of God, that Abraham was a prophet after all, and he was interacting with it. But then he sees these three guys coming who he thought they were human, though they were angels, and he says to God, excuse me, may I attend to these guests, right? So even, in the presence of God, you will ask, may I attend to guests? Where am I? Now, once God saw Abraham tying and untying, let me just make sure. Tying and untying the bandage on his circumcision, God said, it is not proper conduct to stand there, i.e., it is not respectful to Abraham, even for God to stand there while he has to fix his bandage. And this is as it is written. Just note the very careful use of the language. Genesis 18:2, speaking about Abraham. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men stood over him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them. So which is it? When he looked, they were standing right above him? Or they were in the distance and he had to run to meet them. Those are contradictory. But the explanation is like this. The verse first states that they stood over him, and then it says that he ran to meet them. And the Gemara reconciles this apparent contradiction. Initially, they were angels and they came and they stood over him. But upon seeing that he was in pain, they said it is not proper conduct to stand here. So being angels, they just, teleported themselves to a distance so that Abraham could, get ready properly to greet them. Now the Gemara continues, who are these 3 men, right, who turn out to be angels? They are the angels, Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, right? Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Michael, who came to announce to Sarah that she would give birth to her son Isaac. Raphael, who came to heal Abraham after his circumcision. And Gabriel, who went to overturn Sodom, right? Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So Michael means, who is like God or who is God, who is God. Gabriel means has the strength of God, and that's why he's sent on warlike missions. And Raphael means the healer of God, right? Who heals like God. That you see that in their names. So Gabriel was sent to overturn Sodom. So the Gemara asks, but it is written, and the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening. So if there was only Gabriel was sent to destroy Sodom, why were 2 angels dispatched there? And the Gemara answers that Michael went along with Gabriel to Sodom to save Lot, right? Abraham's nephew, Lot. So the Gemara notes that the language is also precise, as it is written, and he overturned those cities. And it is not written, they overturned those cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. Conclude from it that only 1 angel overturned Sodom. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara asks, what is different with regard to the incident involving Abraham where the angels acquiesced immediately to his request to remain with him? As it is written, so do as you have said, is what the angel said to Abraham when he asked him to stay. And what is different with regard to Lot, where they first displayed reluctance, as it is written, now we're at the top of 87a, and he urged them, Lot urged them greatly, Genesis 19:3, only after which they acquiesced to stay by his house. Rabbi Lazar says, from here we learn that one may decline the request of a lesser man, but one may not decline the request of a great man. And the Gemara continues analyzing the same passage. It is written, and I will fetch a morsel of bread and satisfy your heart. And it is written, and Abraham ran to the herd and fetched a calf tender and good. And Rabbi Elazar said, from here we learn that the righteous say little and do much, whereas the wicked say much and do not do even a little. You would think it would be that in the wicked say much and do little. No, they don't even do a little. Right? This is a great Talmudic saying. I'll repeat it. From the comparison of Abraham and Lot, we learned that the righteous say little and do much, whereas the wicked say much and do not do even a little. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. I think we'll make an AT meme out of that little saying right there on Bava Metzia 87a. Okay, I see 2 comments from Bill. This sounds a bit like a put-up job by the Heavenly Academy. The sages in the hereafter are surely aware that God of all people would know, but they need an excuse to get Rabbah up and out of the earthly world, so they play act a disagreement to create an excuse. I don't want to ascribe intentions to what the sages are doing up in Shemayim, but surely there was more to it than we could understand just by reading here. And Bill also says he was willing to pay his daughter in spikenard for fanning him, and instead the wind fanned him, and so he was asking, probably a little tongue-in-cheek, how much spikenard he owes the angels that God put in charge of the winds. Thank you, Bill. You know what? Thank you, obviously. He asked her to fan him and said he would pay her with expensive perfume, and then the wind blew and cooled him down, and how much more spikenard he would have owed. Of course, thank you. I don't know why I didn't get it. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to be learning with you. May you have a wonderful, joyous celebration of Lag BaOmer. No class tomorrow, Sunday. Nina and I going on a short trip out of town. No class on Tuesday. Possibly class on Monday, depending on whether the Wi-Fi connection is strong enough for me to teach from the hotel where we will be. I will announce it on the Facebook page with God's help. All the best. Good Vach. Shavua Tov.